gives you a chance to play a physical martial character.
Yeah.
Or if you're a physical martial character, you get a chance to play a caster.
Yeah.
You know, like, or if you went might combat in Mordavia, now you can go agility combat for Chronicles.
Yeah.
You can try
change
out
it up.
other things. You know, like
or in your case, you can kind of play with higher level builds that you would want your character to eventually aspire to,
try out,
anyway,
yeah.
but may not be able to because of actual realistic factors of having to build your character.
Yeah. Yeah.
But this is something that's actually an interesting note is the player experience of doing Chronicles like we're doing, or having this break from the general campaign.
Yeah.
Because there's definitely sometimes like a fatigue thing that comes on, especially if you're doing really frequent tabletop games. Back when you were in high school and didn't have anything better to do.
it can get monotonous. You know. Like,
yeah. And then for Chronicles in particular, as we were saying, you don't have to worry about a lot of the things that you worry about is your normal character.
Like your character dying.
Pretty much.
Right,
Exactly.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
The consequences of such a thing are not as important overall because you are playing in a set history moment that you can't change the overall history of, but it's about you as a player playing in this moment and experiencing this extra level of story. And this isn't going to be much of a spoiler for anybody, but last iteration I had a nature attuned elf named Cylindrian. He did a bunch of cool role play, got a bunch of people involved in nature magic, and ended up dying. Well, he was always telling the story about this event that players will be experiencing in Chronicles, which led him to fleeing Morgrim's hordes.
Nice.
So
No shit.
yeah, so there's going to be a couple of players who are going to be playing this game whose characters directly interacted with this character in the last iteration several times, playing in the actual events that he told them about.
That's fucking
Nice.
awesome. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's definitely bonus candy.
Yes. Yeah. So for player experience wise, that's another big focus of the Chronicles kind of blockbuster game. And then as you were saying, you're going to be able to play a lot higher level characters, generally speaking, because of the nature of the way that we're doing it. Limited number of people, so the plot focuses a lot deeper.
And not just the mechanical sense, but you can try different things as a character role-play wise also.
Yes.
Like I've mentioned before, there are certain things that seem cool when you picture them in your mind, like the lone badass. But it's like you
Edgelord
don't
is
want to do
bad.
that at a LARP because
No.
you're going to be off by yourself acting like a lone badass all weekend. Well, if you always play a very outgoing social character, maybe you could do like that lone guy that's off by himself the entire time in the Chronicles game
especially
because it's a one-off. You
Exactly.
can do it for one weekend. It would get exhausting to play that character all the time.
Yeah.
But or being a dick to everybody, just walking around being an asshole to everybody. Why? Because why not?
Why
just
not?
for fun. Just for fun. And if this character gets permed because you're walking around being a dick to everybody, okay, well you got to get it out of your system. You know what I mean? Like
You tried it once.
had some fun role play. You know, like it's great. It's absolutely great for
That is
you know?
interesting from a greater community standpoint. Everybody is a little bit looser in what's going on because they're not invested in the same way for this long-term progression.
Yeah, it's a weekend.
I think a zombie game with a Chronicles event would be awesome if you had people have one life and every time they die they get pulled off and now they're a zombie. So like the actual number of living players in the game is shrinking every combat, every scene. You know, like
Well,
It's going to just end up a bunch of elves.
that's kind of how it's going to work.
yeah, pretty much.
That's kind of how it's going to work. If you
no
were
elf,
to,
no elves at this game. It's a human outpost or some shit. You know,
so
like,
actually, we'll probably offer you two options. If you want to diligently play your dead body somewhere, I guess you could do that as long as you have the stamina to do so. Or when your character perms, you can come in, play on our
so,
side.
like, when that
So
zombie gets
go and
knocked
try and
down.
kill the rest of your friends.
Like you come back out as yourself, but as a zombie you, and if that zombie gets taken down, then maybe you can come. You roll a die. Remember like the res system at old Dreamscape, where you would die.
Reflex!
You would reach into a bag of stones or something, and if you pulled in a black one, your character permed, and if you pulled a white one, you came back to life. And every time you pulled a white one out, that was the number of stones in the bag, so it always became more likely that you were going to perm each time you died. You do something like that for
so I
a
don't think
one-off
Dreamscape
game.
used that system. They used to determine if you came back or not. That was a Phoenix Nexus.
Was that
thing.
Nexus? Okay.
But I think the mechanic
I died
they used,
several times at Phoenix and Nexus.
I think the
it's
mechanic
all
that
like
might have
a
been
bundle.
used had to do with if you remembered coming back to life or not. But I'm pretty sure they eventually got rid of that.
Oh, fair enough. Okay.
Or not remember coming, but remembered the things that before you
Man,
died.
I had to reach into that bag like 3 times. So I remember. I think that was that was the half giant Nexus. Is what that was.
Yeah.
That's right. Not Dreamscape.
Ancient history.
Yeah.
Yeah, a million
Way
years
back
ago.
when y'all were spry and had no hair upon your
Yeah,
chin.
I was like 19.
Yeah.
Something like
many
that,
many
yeah.
years before I had to shave on a regular basis.
Before I have
for
like
sure.
longer, odd-shaped, directional gray chest hairs, it's just one by itself. What are you
Yeah.
doing there, little guy? He's like, nothing, big guy. Like,
You don't talk to them, they'll invite friends.
they always do.
Yeah, so this is how we start world building with big bad monsters. We just let Gillis talk about horrible visualization things and go from there.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I love monstering at every level we're played at. I love monstering at Mordavia, and some of the most fun I've had there is when we go in there and whoever's running the war room is like, oh well, we got this taken care of and this taken care of. What do you something you feel like going out as? And I'm like, ooh.
I said brainworms one
I'm like-
time, and Gillis actually was like, no.
No,
Just shook his head like, no.
Yeah, once all the story stuff is done, it opens up the door for a bit more
Shenanigans?
fun.
I'm always like, can I have some innate and rages? That's all I want. I want innate and rages. I'll walk around, and we got Charles. If you guys might someday see him on the show, I don't know, but he's gigantic, absolutely massive, and he always plays these combat monster characters that have big swords, and he prides himself on hurting you when he hits you with the sword and stuff like that. Like he's
It's
a combat beast. So I
It's
run up.
not that bad.
I run up to him.
It's foam.
While one of our friends is like helping him put his bracer on. So she's like helping him put it on and sew it up, and I run up behind him. I'm like, in rage, and I run off, and I get like 20 feet away, and I see him. He just looks at her, looks at me, and I'm like. And he just like picks up a sword and starts attacking her, and she runs. It's so much fun. I love monsters.
I had a character that was assassinated in play once when I was getting into my armor. They were like, "Hey, are you in play?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm just getting into my armor. Cool. What about my business?" 2 minutes later, got assassinated.
Damn.
Yeah.
It was savage. I couldn't even be mad. And I was like, "No, I was in play, and they totally got me."
Yep.
Well, since we're here and we're going to talk about it today,
Yeah.
Mordavia or games in general, the world building process.
Mm-hmm.
What is your story? How do you do it?
All right, let's start from a relevant tabletop world building story before I go into the Mordavia world building story, because it'll help highlight the differences in the way the process works. So all these tabletop games that you play, they already have the story and the setting ready to go.
Oh yeah.
And even if you're home brewing stuff, you still basically have a world setting to
skeleton,
base off of. And in something like Faroon in particular, there's so many options, so many places to play. I love Faroon. So as unique as you can get, even if you throw out all the world stuff and go old school Dungeon Master style and randomly roll a world creation from the random charts, you're still using the general framework of whatever game it is that you're playing to make that system. So if you're playing D&D, while there are rules to make it no magic, steampunky, things like that, you might as well just play D20 Modern. Because Dungeons & Dragons is really meant to be a fantasy magic sort of world. And you can do pretty easily world creation and story creation because it's very tropey, plug-and-play sort of style.
True.
So myself and a handful of the other owners of LarpWorks have a suspended game that's in its last 1 or 2 sessions.
Wow.
Yeah, and we haven't played it in a while because we've been trying to finish
So when are we
work on our
playing?
stuff. It's right.
Yeah,
when are we playing?
When are we playing? Right?
At my brother Matt. When are we finishing this game?
Yeah.
It's been on hold for years.
No shit. We're
Yeah.
like, fuck.
So
Does he listen?
he's gonna.
Okay. Chris, this is when you actually lean in and go, Matt, when are we playing?
You're right. You're right, Matt. When are we playing?
Yeah.
So that aside, because it's gonna bother me all day now because we haven't played in years. The world that we played in started out really random and goofy. We were all hanging out, just goofing off, and trying to come up with. I forget exactly how it started, but we were listing off the most ridiculous, lawful good, white magic, holy type ridiculousness that we could, and so. We're like, what would be the main power of this place? The holy order of righteousness. Like, what are some of the places in here? The forests of abundance. The
Force of abundance.
The fields of plenty. The
peaceful pond of moisture.
Yeah, the peaceful prairie. All these super generic, almost cringe-worthy, good aligned things.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm just ignoring it.
Tree of Verdance.
No, but you have the idea.
That's better than the Pond of
It was,
Moisture.
and so the story was is that
Nothing's better than
this
the Pond of
world
Moisture.
was a neutral plane, but it had been taken over by fanatical good guys, and
hate when that
they
happens.
I know.
and they had
so
contacted the celestial realms, who were helping them actively colonize this plane to turn it from neutral alignment to mildly good aligned. And we, the PCs, are 5 PCs and just a handful of NPCs that are the last evil aligned things on the plane. And our epic quest is to simply stop the plane from shifting alignment from neutral to mildly good. So we're trying to do just enough evil to balance out them from going fanatically, like changing the system of this plane. It's hilarious.
And how many of them are there?
PCs or
NPCs, like how many people are actually? Are you looking at like an army?
we're looking at an entire
existence,
nation,
right?
Yeah.
There are a handful of pockets of evil left in the world,
Yeah,
maybe
they're like-
5 all
The
together.
entire nation wakes up and it's like, "Good morning, Fred. Good morning, Bill. Good morning, Jack.
Yes,
Good morning, Jim."
yes, and then they go on holy righteous crusades to try and wipe out the last vestiges of evil. And our group is hilariously incompetent because I'm the only lawful evil one. Everybody else is pretty much self-serving and
Organized
wild.
form of evil.
Yeah.
Neutral evil, chaotic evil.
So you would think that we should make allies with the other evil
nope,
folks.
evil
No,
don't work like that.
They made such terrible enemies with 2 of the main bad guys that
Wouldn't they be good guys if you're evil?
no. The bad guys. They're the last other evil NPCs in the world, basically.
Okay.
So the group, when I was not there, went neutral and chaotic evil so much on these other evil entities that when they eventually went and did some evil stuff to a silver dragon, the silver dragon went and allied itself with these 2 evil. It's like a hag and some crazy evil like ogre mage or something. Allying with a silver dragon against our group.
Holy shit.
Oh my God, y'all are just friendly.
It was terrible. It was so bad. And they're like, "Yeah, let's free demons." And I'm like, "No." And now, like, let's talk to devils because we can make contracts to like help them fight. And they're like, "No, that's a terrible idea." I was like, "Y'all are getting wishes from demons.
of,
We're
like,
summoning more demons. Like, what are you talking about?"
World building and changing the alignments of a plane.
So
like,
yeah, that was it. Just started with us like just goofing off, and then became this thing, and we drew out a little map, and then started to be like, "This is the hollow of holiness," just all this, and yeah, and we were in like the red light docks or something like. It's such a good world that even the worst places were like, not that bad.
Yeah. Okay.
So then, but even so,
It was like-
it's
it was
clearly
like-
a D&D world,
Yeah.
right? Like, or whatever fantasy you said it. That's clearly what it is because
Yeah.
that's the setting that it was
That's the
built up on.
framework. Yeah.
Then you go to something like Mordavia, which we have kind of a series of writing prompts that so a writing prompt that inspired another writing prompt that inspired another writing prompt, which inspired LarpWork Presents Mordavia, basically.
Yeah.
So years ago, we got permission from the folks in New Zealand who ran a LARP called Mordavia in New Zealand, and I'm pretty sure they have a video up online still right now, and everybody should watch it. It's like this little documentary. It's amazing. And we basically got permission to use anything that we wanted out of that intellectual property. That story was based off of a computer game, which I never even knew existed. It was a series of computer games, actually. I think it's like Quest for the Crown, something like that.
oh shit.
Yeah, so anyway, I want to say it's Quest for the Crown 4, and the basic premise of that game is that you are a sole hero who is in this world called Mordavia, and you're in this little town in the center of a swamp that's got you cut off from the rest of the world, and it's creeping in on you, and you've only got X amount of time to figure out what's going on before everybody dies.
Oh shit.
All right.
And one of the mayors of the town, who everybody thinks is super sketchy, turns out to be this vampire who is kind of super sketchy, but he actually knows a lot about what's going on with this stuff and is doing the sketchy things to try and save people. And so from that, it developed the base story for the New Zealand LARP, which is, I don't know about the vampire parts of it, but they were in a isolated swamp hovel that was getting eaten up.
Sketchy mayor.
Yeah.
Yeah, and right, sketchy mayor.
You don't know
Just like
anything
Mordavia,
about
Mordavia.
it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the world was cut like you could get outside of the swamp area, but eventually the world was cut off by what we now know as Atul in our game.
Yeah.
So, and you can see how it kind of like builds on itself.
Yeah.
But after that, we pretty much ran with it, you know, to want to tell the stories that we wanted to tell. And the only other framework that we really picked or kept were some of the races. So human, obviously.
Yeah.
They had, I'm pretty sure they had Gypsy, which is now our Wildkin. They had Fairy, which the description of Fairy is basically how our fairies are now. Half white spirit creatures, essentially. And I was like, well, there should be one of every type of magic. And then I created the Zana race, which I hate myself to this day for. And then, because it just makes logical sense for you know, our world having the 6 different types of magic. And we kept demons, we kept elves.
And dwarves.
What? Did somebody say something? Anyway, so we kept a few of the things that they had. Whoop. Now that we're back after our technical difficulties, I was saying that we kept a handful of races, expanded on them a bit, but from there it was really our stories that we wanted to tell, and we approached it from the standpoint that we were writing a book that people could interact with, kind of like an old school choose your own adventure. But without the ability to, you know, hold your page and like go and see which one of the options is better.
Right. Yeah.
But we approached it with that in mind. So we initially, before it was even Mordavia, back when it was still Quintessence, the first stories that ever got written down was the end of the game. The picture that I sent you that's dated from March of 2007 or May of 2007. That is the literal end of the story, working backwards.
Okay.
So the very first note is endgame, and then it goes backwards from there to the less and less bad versions of the end of the world as it was being envisioned then. But the way that we tell our stories in particular is we want to have themes and moods for each chapter, each episode, and we want our stories to feel more real. You know, we want people to be able to relate to a lot of these stories in a more intense way and bring real world relevant situations into a place without dire consequences for doing things that may be wrong in the real world.
Putting a player in a moral and ethical bind is it's a favorite of mine. I enjoy doing it.
Oh yeah.
And with the crew you've got there, you're like, this will be an ethical challenge for them or a moral challenge. You're like, no, they just walked through that like it was a spider web.
Some people do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a couple times players had surprised me. I thought I was gonna last iteration, you know, throw off this demon by having his sister be my slave, basically, and you know, lording her over him and making them fight each other in the demon tournament. And it didn't faze him at all. He's like, I'm gonna kill her and I'm gonna eat her because it's better than letting her be your slave. And I was like, ooh, I got outplayed. I had nothing for that. And I thought for sure, I was like, this is gonna be deep and emotional. Oh no, he crushed me. Crushed me.
Threw it right back on you.
Yeah. But that's the thing. We want to have these weird, darker, kind of gray area stories, which you can totally do in tabletop games. You could do, in fact, you can go a lot farther in tabletop games, especially when it's you and your crew.
Oh yeah.
But it's way cooler to have a bunch of people around witnessing this stuff go on.
Witnessing the trauma. Mm-hmm. The trauma's more fun when you see people seeing it.
Right.
Yeah.
Or so going back to
Misery loves company.
To the demon tournament last year, whenever I was playing Lord Wrath, and I was waiting for Thamus to die, and I was running around talking shit or whatever, and Raven tries to start chirping at me, and I was saying some fairly vile and degrading things. Which you would never say in public to people, but it fit the character and what was going on because I just killed her man. I was about to go Ashurbanipal, Assyrian emperor on them and take over their whole house and do whatever I wanted and loot them and all this stuff.
Just a Viking pentathlon.
Yeah, and it was really intense because as I was saying various things, the crowds there reacted like, ooh, ooh. And then, of course, some of them are instigating because they're my people.
Yeah.
It's just so intense. But that's real stuff that in that crowded, real setting when somebody is actually degrading you or you're in a situation where somebody you really care about is dying, there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
It's so intense.
Yeah, when you've actually formed the attachments.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
And
y'all keep giving us stuffed animals.
the pet's such a great idea. So good.
Oh yeah. I'm gonna get a beard for mine and a little beer mug.
So cute.
I've got to go through. Yeah, there's little Lego glasses, Lego Steins, and I'm gonna just sew it onto his hand and make him a little cloth beard.
That's super cool.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna make the other dwarves just fall in love with him.
Titus
Titus is going to just like. I'm gonna talk to Titus with him. Just because I know he's gonna die.
But anyway, getting back on track,
Oh, yeah.
freaking crazy dwarves. So going off of like how intense of a real life situation that is, but in the context of having it happen in the LARP space,
Yeah.
is that we aren't telling stories just to entertain our friends and be able to hang out and roll dice and things like that, which is super fun. We're trying to, me in particular, I'm trying to be a storyteller. We're telling stories. Traditionally, it's plot.
Yeah.
We still say that because it's just kind of an old school LARP term that's probably never going to go away. But we try not to call ourselves plot. We're storytelling staff. We're storytellers because we're trying to tell a story. We're trying to narrate to you.
Yeah.
We're not trying to plot on you.
Even though they're always plotting on you.
They're completely plotting.
Well, it's what we're plotting is the future advancement of the story through the various flows that are opened or closed based on dynamic player choice.
Personally,
that
I've
makes sense,
always looked at the word plot and thought they're in charge of the plot of the story. They're not plotting to get us.
Right, that's actually what it
Yeah.
means, but that's not the context it usually comes into because it's an us versus them sort of thing.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why we go with storyteller, narrator, chronicler is that we're in the business of telling a dynamic, interactive story that you as the players can change the outcome of.
Okay.
If no players ever came to the game, I could write a book that is A to Z what would happen if no heroic soul interacted with the story.
Yeah.
But that's the whole point of the game, is that you as heroic souls come to the game, experience these various things, and alter that.
Yeah.
Which is a little bit of an aside. The real point for going back a little bit, the difference between tabletop world building and LARP world building is that tabletop world building is more meant to be a fun, creative exercise, for you and a handful of people, your buddies in the tabletop way. It's just a little bit of a different variation from any other game you ran. Or you might have a cool idea for a thing that you know what, instead of trying to put it in a world, let me just draw up a landmass real quick, and this is where we're going to run it. It could literally be anywhere.
Yeah.
Whereas LARPs, there is generally a story that has to be created, that needs to be told, and the world is built up around the stories that need to be told. But for LarpWork Presents Mordavia in particular, we built up the world around real world things. Some uncomfortable stuff in some cases.
It's a very adult theme.
Right. It's kind of like the World of Darkness of LARP almost, but not quite that.
Yeah.
I mean, the World of Darkness actually has a lot of influence on various things in the Mordavia system. But it's in particular how we had to create stories in order to be able to get certain themes across, certain feelings that we wanted players to interact with as storytellers.
Yeah.
And you don't do that the same way, generally speaking, with tabletop games.
No, you get a lot more. There's a lot of dialogue in both, but there's a lot of pushing through. And in game, you get in tabletop, you get a lot of descriptions. But I know when I'm at LARP, like there's something walking towards us, and no one is standing there telling us, you see this walking towards you.
It used to be that way, though.
Well, that's pretty unique for us as a conscious game design, because we we all have a particular story of when Hold What Do I See has just ruined the scene.
That was monstering back.
Yeah.
Like, Hold What Do I See? You see an 8 foot tall, yellow skinned humanoid, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if I told the story on the podcast last time, but it was like I
You were
jumped
about to
over,
kill
killed the
somebody?
dude,
Yeah.
was turning, ready to kill the thing, and it was like, Hold What Do I See? Like, what?
Yeah.
So we wanted to eliminate that as much as possible because like, well, what do you see?
Yeah.
If you can't tell, then you can't tell. It doesn't. Like, that's just how it is. And it adds that extra level of suspense and horror.
Oh yeah.
Which goes also into our world because it's meant to specifically be a survival horror game where you have a limited amount of lives. Your choices really deeply matter.
Oh yeah.
And that's a much different speed from a lot of other games that you'll go to.
Now, I mean, just from being a first-time player, and my first time at Mordavia, or LarpWork Presents Mordavia. You gotta say the whole thing.
LarpWorks Presents Mordavia.
Yes, that's because Mordavia itself is several steps of intellectual property removed. So
you say the whole.
LarpWorks Presents Mordavia.
Yeah, my first time.
Officially.
Yeah, when I broke my LARP cherry. That weekend we were out there and doing this thing, and all of a sudden there's like a bunch of catkin out there killing people.
Sounds terrible.
And I showed up and like Gillis is running me through all these like, okay, don't go anywhere without anyone else. Watch, see what's going on. Always keep your eye on the field. What people are doing is very important. Oh, and watch out for catkin. What are catkin? Don't worry, if you see them out there, just get away. And they're horrible.
Gotta teach your new friends the basics, man.
Yeah, they're horrible.
Yeah, friends don't let friends come to LARP unprepared.
Right.
Yeah. But as bad as they were in my first game, I have a stronger sense of foreboding at this point as we're looking at the downhill turn. Just like, oh God, what's going to happen? Having brought the wife to play once, she's like in love with it. She spent all of Saturday night like hiding behind this barrier and getting people like, do you need to hide with us? Like, yes, all right, I'm order, come in through this barrier. And yeah, there wasn't none of that in chapter 2. Now we're a little further along, and yeah.
They're a wildkin trying to get through that didn't have fire magic, didn't have metal weapons, couldn't get through the wood wall.
Now it's not that much of a challenge.
Now it's not that. Yep.
Nope,
It's more of a speed bump than an actual deterrent.
Yeah. That's enough time to maybe get your hand on your weapon.
You know, it's
Hey,
funny.
sometimes that's all you need.
Sometimes, yeah. Or to do your quick little 5-second count to get out of the barrier yourself and run.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's. I remember I got cornered. Same thing. Actually, I was gearing up, but David walked through. He had a couple of players. I don't remember exactly, and they were dominated basically. I think Hollow Man was one of them. They're dominated, and he walks through, and two of the people in the room. He's like, "Are you in play yet?" No, I just got here. You in play yet? Not even a character sheet. Are you in play yet? Like.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I just finished my tavern shift.
I already know where this is going.
I was getting dressed, and then so-and-so runs up. Hollow Man does his crazy high claw damage at the wall, and he's like, all right, and goes to lift it up, and I'm like, fire and metal, fire and metal. And then the other person had fire damage, so it was like arcane 50 fire, arcane 50 fire, arcane 50 fire. I was like,
damn.
Yeah, that did it. But as he was doing the thing, I was touching the wall there, and I was like, I got the fuck out of there and ran.
Oh, yeah.
You know, all you need is a few seconds to get out of there and run, man.
But
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the things I actually like about the system. Barriers are good. They're protection. They're also a trap. I mean, the way that's actually put together, if you're not smart, you can trap yourself.
Yep.
I've offered to put up barriers where people are like, no, I can't get through there. I'm a demon. I'm like, I don't care about your safety
Yeah,
as much as my safety.
Oh,
But
man.
I mean, it's well built and well thought out.
You know, I will say with world building, one thing that I was always guilty of with tabletopping was kind of ad-libbing a lot of it. So I typically won't have like the greater some people are amazing with like working out the entire economics of the continent and things like that. I'm just like, yeah, you're in this fishing village named Rested Prairie. What's outside of it? Who's got knowledge skills? None of us. Fuck off. Let me know when you do. Yeah, that's
and that goes a lot to, I guess, what you're trying to accomplish. Because I can see in some cases, like, all right, this is the general knowledge of the stuff that you have around there. But if you're actually trying to get them to play the game and use the systems in there, it's like, oh, you want to know a thing? Well, maybe you should have a knowledge of the thing you want to know about.
Yeah.
Like even if you got 1 point in it, unless you make a dice roll, you know.
Pretty much. Now actually, oh god, I wish I could remember the site. It's got all these crazy, D&D and Pathfinder stories. But somebody
Reddit.
No, well, it wasn't
Reddit's
Reddit. It
got
was
a ton of
actually
really good ones.
It could have been Reddit. Yeah, I read it a while ago. ADD. But they had this basic story where somebody actually the resources of the town became very important because there was a lot of salt, and the players ended up mining salt, and there was a portal into the elemental plane of Earth where there was just salt elementals just coming through.
Salt elementals.
And they were like, they took control of that, and like, they basically threw salt in a desert where salt's very important, like ruined the economy.
Damn.
Because they just like put too much out there and ended up like a very in-depth game, which is, you know, really interesting because the GM for this game just was on his toes and took care of the brain fart, the total economy.
Yep.
Based off of, you know, this, and he started charting how it would screw up the economy just from where salt was needed, who else was producing it, this, that, and the other. And it started from one simple question. What's in this area? How much can we get for a bag of salt?
Jeez. Man, sometimes when you nerd out about a thing, you really nerd out.
Yeah, there's no greater hurdle to breaking your character than a DM being super specific and knowledgeable about what you can or can't get in his area. It's like, hey, I've got so and so much gold. I'm getting braces of archery too now, right? It's like you're in a small hamlet. There's not a son of a bitch. You know
Right,
what I mean?
who possibly could you even?
I go to the
think
generic
talk to?
magic shop.
They don't even have that
with
here.
all the items that are. It's the same items at every shop around the world, like every other
No.
These guys might as
video
well be playing
game.
banjos.
No.
So this is actually the story that you just told me. Makes me want to ask you guys a question as far as being a DM or GM or whatever, and doing and just running games in general. So do you generally I'm running a game, I'm going to build a world, or do you more often than not just be like, you know what, I want to do something entertaining, I think this would be a fun story to run, and then just dump it into the setting without building up any extra world
I'm the
stuff?
second one all the way, man. Like now, if I get into a campaign, if we're a few sessions in with this group, we're having fun, and I think y'all are gonna want to take these characters up to high level. Like no one is already talking about an alternate character they want to play for our next game or whatever. You know, in that case, I might then flesh out the world more.
Right, because I think you describe you're a static kind of person. You're like, here's the
I
main
respond to
area
the players.
you
You know what
are,
I
and
mean?
if you want to branch
like,
out, we'll branch out.
If any of the characters make characters who are inherently linked in some way to, like, say, the nobility of the area, well, then I'll research a lot of that. But when I play in Faerun, I don't know if you remember the 3.5 Forgotten Realms world book. There were the whole pages that had the shadowy, dark areas. My games always took place in those. It was always like, there's a small village out here. It's on the outskirts of this region.
Like on a rock.
Yep, like in the middle of nowhere, and that was where the game took place. And in my experience,
you don't need a whole lot of the world.
Yeah, you don't. Like as long as all the players, as long as all of the players stayed interested and captivated in the story that you were telling, I found you didn't really need to know. Which, like, I'm fine at using everything in Faerun. I mean, Faerun obviously coolest continent on Toril, but I mean, like, I don't want to learn the encyclopedic book of everything in Faerun and always have it available. I mean, I've read it many times, but like maybe when I was younger, but I didn't even then. I didn't then. Specifically a small region, a little area. I'll familiarize myself with. Like,
which is even how the video
what kind of
games do it.
monsters would be around the area? I mean, that's about it.
When you're in Waterdeep, you really don't need to do anything else.
Yeah.
And then the whole area of the High Forest is so
City,
huge. Like then you have all this other stuff.
If you're in anywhere, Baldur's Gate or whatever, and also in my experience too, the few times in my life where I've gotten a new game setting, like I got Eberron for 3rd edition, and I read the book cover to cover.
Yeah.
We started. None of my players gave a shit about the actual like story. They're like, I'm a fighter, greatsword, 2d6 damage. What's different? Oh, I'm the shifter race for the extra strength. Oh, okay.
So
that's it, though. But like that was,
I want to get Mikey's opinion on the same question before we take a break, because then I want to come back and talk about it in regards to world building and game running for LARP. I'm
much more in the other direction, because when I look for a game, I kind of have a spiel that goes to my head. It's the game itself, and I'll start with the antagonist, and I work backwards from the antagonist. What does the antagonist want to do? Why is he here? What's going on? What revolves around them? Who are they use? Who's the antagonist using to actually get things done? How is this possible? So once I start asking, how is this possible? What players do I want in this situation? What else is going on in the world? Do I have to shift anything within the game? And I like to get a vague knowledge of the cosmology, anything that I've changed to make this a playable game. I mean, you're not going to, within Faerun and, Eberron and all these other settings, there's a setting there for what you want.
Right.
But I don't run D&D. So I do have settings, and I can really go from there and just tweak a little bit here and there, but with, like, I run C.J. Corella's Witchcraft.
Mm-hmm.
Or...
Interesting system.
Yeah, I love it. I run a lot of Palladium, or used to, and different
OG.
things. Oh, yeah.
First tabletop character ever was a Rift Slate Line Walker.
Nice.
I played a juicer.
I was a
Anyway,
I was a hatchling dragon, actually. My first one.
I have no idea what that even is. So you're way deep into Palladium.
Oh
But
no,
anyway,
it was the first book.
Yeah, so I just wanted to get that out the way because it'll highlight a lot of world building differences.
Oh yeah. What I've ended up realizing is the more tweaks you make higher up, the smaller tweaks you have to make throughout, and you get a basic idea. Because without a doubt, I'm not sure why I have the problem and you don't, but my players ask crazy off the wall questions like, how do I go about doing this? Like, ooh.
That's when you say roll initiative, bro. That's when you're like,
Yeah, and like I had to make had to break down how Rufus Bismarck ended up where he was in life.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
That's right.
Because I made one little tweak in the cosmology of the game, and it changed everything underneath it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you can just see from the implications how something where in LARP, if you did something like that, it changes people's invested experiences, perhaps, based on the things that they actually know.
That was a fun character, too.
Oh, yeah.
He's an out-of-shape, descendant of Thor. I made a character that was basically an out-of-shape descendant of Thor about a year before out-of-shape Thor on the movies. And we were like, that's what I was describing. That right there. That's exactly what. Yep.
All right, guys. Well, we're coming up on time for a break, so we will come back to you in just a few.
All right.
See you later.
We need death.
But if it happens, that's something that we need to be prepared for, because that's a major player of one of our major pieces of the entire world story, and it would be bad for us to not have ever considered what would happen if the leader of one of these nation states essentially died all of a sudden, let alone was assassinated.
Oh yeah.
Or just publicly murdered.
Right. Just any
Just
of those.
wantonly.
Yeah, it's
just,
one thing to kill the mayor or kill an emissary, but killing the bishop, yeah, that's even the mangy heretics would go.
Right. It was like, oh, that might have been too much, guys. A little too much. But not to harp on it, we can move on to a little bit more. But this really just solidifies that in tabletop, you have time to worry about this, whereas in LARP, it needs to already be kind of solidified as to what the main actions would be in the worst case scenario.
Yeah. So how do you do you already have a general idea of what monsters are going to be showing up or what interactions are going to be available depending on the tier of the game from the highest to the lowest?
Oh yeah. So the general easy kind of flowing rule is whatever tier of the highest people or the highest whatever the highest player tier is, the highest level generic bosses at the end of mods and things like that aren't specific NPCs who are whatever level they need to be for their story purposes.
Yeah.
That's not to say that we change their levels all the time, but if Maravis the Great Destroyer needs 100 levels to fully be the Great Destroyer because he's that important of a story piece, then he is.
Yeah.
We have a bunch of players who are now tier 4. Then there's a good chance that more and more bosses at the ends of higher level mods will either be straight up tier 5, or we'll have a smattering of some tier 5 abilities. Because the game is evolving along with the heroic souls.
Yeah.
Now, as far as in-town monsters and whatnot go, some of that comes to, hey, we're bored, players are bored, let's do some stuff.
Yeah, sometimes on monstering, y'all make us do some just naughty shit to town. Just who all's out there? Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
And that's that's to keep up the general entertainment and engagement value. But other
Yeah,
times,
no,
you also
it's
say,
very
hey,
entertaining to monster.
these are the things that we need you to be, and the goals that we need you to accomplish, the people we need you to talk to, because it's part of this other story that's happening.
Yeah.
And so we have a pretty healthy mix of doing that, and just to kind of keep it kind of fair, we scale the game up sort of relative to the highest average player level, for the most part.
Yeah, keep it interesting, keep people on their toes, don't feel it too easy, and also keep that sense of fear and dread.
Yeah, and we have some back end systems, and we're working on our own Dungeon Master's Guide. Basically, it's the crew manual, and it's like, here's the mod, the basis of it. All right.
Yeah, I think if you're not kind of afraid and stressed, you're not like LARPing right.
Well, I mean, there's
Personally, like,
things.
player,
Well,
like
I mean,
a little. If you're not a little uncomfortable all the time, you're not LARPing right.
Maybe.
You're not feeling it. You're not in the moment.
Yeah.
Or you could just be a solid badass and get so good at the things that your character does that you just feel secure and confident that you can handle your shit in pretty much any situation.
Well, that security is still just a feeling.
Yeah.
That's all it is, man.
I mean, that's
wrong person
that's
gets
why,
up behind you.
That's why the dwarves will never amount to anything great, because of attitudes like that.
I don't know. You just
Anyway,
you just tossed out a whole scenario in which the dwarves are going to amount to something great. I mean,
Maybe.
Yeah.
greatly renowned. Anyway,
Like killing the bishop.
Yeah. God, this is my own fault. I lost my own track by instigating this conversation against a group of freaking dwarves. No, it's gone. I killed it.
it's
Good job.
gone. The train has left the station.
Yeah,
That's
it has.
right.
But no, we were talking about NPCs and basically threats, antagonists coming out.
Oh, right. So, kind of generally speaking, the ideal mod group is 6 to 8 players and 3 to 4 monsters to compete against them. And sometimes this is just a reality of LARP. Stuff's going on, and instead of having our full complement of 12 to 15 staff members, we've got 8. So what do we do about that? Generally speaking, we have leeway to kind of mess with the actual power level of the NPCs, because one guy, even if he's level 25, is going to get wrecked by 7 or 8 level 3 guys just because of the way that it works.
Yeah.
So, but realistically, that power level gap should be a lot more severe than like, 7 guys are just poking you with their buffers.
Yeah.
Level 25 guy, like, so that's from a PC standpoint. If you're not ready for that, sorry. But from keeping the game like challenging and keeping things fun and engaging, you'll see, in field battles, for example, when it's 10 of us versus 50 or 60 people, more of us than normal will probably throw in arcanes, because that's the only way that we can mechanically balance out without upping our levels to 50 or something like that, which would just make us unfightable.
Well, y'all have done such a good job, and I'll say this from actually monstering during the bigger field battles. Y'all have done such a good job of instilling fear in the players that even outnumbered, I think there were maybe 10 or 12 of us, and there were 50 of them. The look of fear when they're like, all right, all of you go out there and get them, and they were just horrified. And had they stood their ground and fought, that'd have been a very quick battle.
Oh yeah, that's really classic.
Like I had to squat it up.
That's really classic human warfare type stuff. Going all the way back to Julius Caesar, rampaging around in Gaul, during like the last campaign that made him super famous. He had 3 major battles, and in the second one, his long supply line, over this massive march, got ambushed essentially by an army of Gauls coming down from this hill. And their whole thing was, we're going to be super savage and ferocious, attack this spread out supply line, and we've really only got one chance to make them run. As if we don't, they're the Romans, they're going to organize and slaughter us. And there's been situations in play all the time where the group that just seems the most aggressive usually can just charge at the other people and make them break up.
Dude, we go out as monsters all the time, and like I'm like, I have like no stats. Like I have like or I'm like super low. Like I as my player could kill 4 of these of myself, and like, but you walk out into town, people don't know that. And
Well,
they
and
just
it's-
fucking what the fuck is
And then we've been tougher, and then they're really aggressive, and they're like, oh, oh no, wait, stop.
Yeah, they almost always run when they shouldn't, and they fucking stay and fight when they should totally run.
It's
Like,
some weird dichotomies of things, but it's just it kind of goes into one of the going away from world building at this point and just LARPing in general.
Yeah,
this kind of thing we're talking about is one of the things that I really love about LARP, so much more than tabletop, because you might not be able to set it up quite as dramatically as the real world scenarios of Julius Caesar, but let me tell you, I've been in a field battle where we were basically backs to the wall in an enclosed area and had waves of monsters one at a time coming from around either side of these cabins, and near the end they were spawning waves at the same it was from two different factions too that were our enemies because of what we were trying to do. So it was super intense, and really there were some moments where wow, there's literally 50 guys coming around these corners, and there's less and less of us every second.
Nice.
And just you can't get that same experience.
No, you're much braver when they're not actually physically coming at you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I mean, there's been times, especially early on, where I would get attacked. People would start hitting me with swords, and I would be like, "Oh my god, I'm dead," because I just forgot how to LARP altogether because I was being attacked and was reacting to being attacked as opposed to reacting with the things that I have to stop that.
Yeah.
And that's also a classic human thing,
Yeah.
Like fight or flight. Like some people immediately, especially if they've been trained and they're on it, they're like, "Oh, that guy's like shifty. I'm ready to throw the spell packet. I don't care what he does. He looks at me wrong. I'm smoking him." And you have other people who are like, "Oh god," and then they're dead because they dropped their weapons because they just got jumped and weren't expecting it.
Oh yeah.
And it's just so visceral and real. And actually bringing this back to world building, since that's our main topic, is I like providing those experiences to people as a storyteller entertainer.
Yeah.
But the way that I find that it works the best is if the world that you are in feels real enough to when you're in these situations, you as a real character are really invested in the outcomes of what's going on. So you might think, this is my last stand because I need whatever's happening behind me to be completed. I will die to make sure that happens.
Yeah.
And, if you can kind of contrive those scenarios, like this is an end of the world scenario, which is fun sometimes. But if you've got really, really compelling worlds and, stories and cultures and things that people really want to get into and really want to emulate, it just makes it that much better.
Like dwarves?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It makes perfect sense. Yeah.
I mean, like those little hairy things that pop out of the ground.
The ones that
They're like
actually
giant, unkept gnomes.
You mean the outstanding crafters?
Yeah, that's crafters,
Elves?
the amazing social people.
Yeah.
Y'all got like 3 elves and like 5 dwarves and shit. That's like,
and it's, and
strong.
just I really like how you keep on going back to this dwarf thing. And just for the folks who don't know, in LarpWork Presents Mordavia, dwarves are a sort of racial slur for the elves who are not the hoity-toity clean elves who are about the
blue collar.
Yeah,
right,
we're
exactly.
working boys.
They're right. They're not the spiritual religious-y kind of folks. They're the blue collar workers who are out in the factories, making stuff happen.
Yeah, we don't commune with the heavens.
And they have
Right. Yeah.
beards.
Exactly. Don't care about that. But but that's part of the story, because that's a real world thing where the difference between the elves and the dwarves as they see themselves is absolutely 1,000% superficial, minus a couple of philosophical differences, but they're not different people as much as these dwarves think and want to be different people, which, like I said, is a very real world thing.
Oh, yeah.
And by paying attention to wanting to bring platforms to where these real world lessons, like, dealing with racism, you can do more extreme behaviors and actually take charge and be like, oh, the government's failing us in whatever this issue is that I'm super passionate about. Well, guess what? In LARP, if the government's failing you, do something about it. And you can kind of explore psychologically where taking action in some of these things would work. But if you tried them in the real world, you could die, you could go to jail, you could get hurt and injured, like all the negative things.
Oh, yeah.
But if you don't have a well-built world, then you can't really make those sorts of organic situations happen.
And actually, the level the level that you built the world was very tight, and you had a lot of the lore there, and there was a lot of legend, and we found a loophole, and we poked at it. And I mean, had it not been so well made, people would have been ready for this. But I mean, we got really into the dwarf thing, and we looked at what was there. We actually pulled out the books, like, what do they say about Geb? Oh, they say this. They say created the elves, created the world. Does it say he's clean shaven? No. Does it say he's an elf? No. Well, of course not.
Of course not. He's a dwarf, obviously.
Right, and exactly. You were able to take what we had crafted as the baseline of the world story.
Yeah.
And we're like, well, how can we tweak it to fit this?
Yeah,
concept
that's why
that
the
we
elves
want?
lost their ancestral home to the half-orcs, because they lost their stones and they lost their beard, and that's when they lost Geb's favor.
Yeah.
That's obviously what happened.
Man.
You know, like, yeah.
No, this is great. But yeah, and this I'm really glad I can have y'all like talking about these things, because it really is just an example of the difference of the world building of the LARP, because you need to have these things be a lot more cohesive for the players to be able to even really relate to it in the first place.
Yeah.
And then at the level that you're really digging into like, the socio-cultural aspects
Yeah.
of the world, which is great, because
And
that
making
means
skin chins uncomfortable.
Right. Yeah, right. But that's what I'm saying. Like, it's so great that you can take these things and bring these relatable real world situations based on the way that the world that you were presented was crafted for you to get into in that way.
And it wouldn't. I doubt something like this would have happened as much in tabletop, because you don't have you've got the 5 people at the table. It becomes a running joke, and then it just kind of goes away, and it's a little jabbing. No, we made a slur.
Yeah.
We have entered a slur into LarpWork Presents.
It's different when you've got something
Mordavia.
ridiculous to act out. You've got a bunch of people to do it in front of, too. It's more like
Yeah.
But that's all really, and this goes to greater topics about LARP philosophy, and in particular my philosophies for LARPs and telling stories at LARPs. But it kind of builds into what you were just about to get into. It's you can interject these real world things into these other spaces that it would otherwise be impossible to be able to explore them. And it's fun when you have these various people being like, "Ooh, I can't believe these people are having this actual racist, combative conversation in the middle of town."
Oh yeah.
And then also from a kind of like a psychology learning standpoint, if you like, these elves and dwarves are having a race war over the hair on their chin.
Yeah.
Over the hair on the god's chin.
You see, how crazy do you people sound?
It's a great metaphor for real world. Yeah, like
exactly.
That. It really is.
Exactly. You people are insane.
I had another
except
idea
to you,
where like
everybody else is insane.
Exactly.
A demon walks around speaking diminutively and dismissively to half-orcs about how they're almost like possessed things. Like, I was there when you were made as a weapon to fight the elves. Why are you out of the toy box? You shouldn't be out of the toy box. We made you. You serve a purpose. Thank you.
Yeah, no, and
you're basically an object of
and that's a real part of the history.
Yeah.
It's like, no, we were having too much trouble fighting the elves by ourselves because they kept on messing with these weird spirit things, so we decided to make a combat thing instead of a squishy magic thing, and that's how we have half-orcs.
Yeah, and that's exactly some fucked up shit a demon would say to a half-orc too.
Yeah, just
fucking
immediate.
demons. Yeah,
And demons just the way
you were
they're
literally
built.
created to be our tools of war.
Yeah, exactly.
And the demon outlook, because of the way it was built, it's they look down on everything else because it's just not a demon.
But then, just because not to shortchange the half-orcs or anything, they actually have their entire own rich culture, and they're like, yeah, well, the demons needed to make us like this because beforehand we were just like really dumb regular orcs, but because of this change, we were able to win our freedom, and we established all this ancient ancestor stuff and had these elder tribes and had this long, deep, rich culture that was thriving in its own way for a long period of time, and you'll actually be able to experience the end of the traditional culture this coming weekend at
That's
Chronicles.
awesome. So, before we close though, or
Because we're getting close to that time.
we're getting close to that time. What do you want to say first, Mikey?
I forgot.
Well, what
So
is-
many things to be able to talk about.
What's in the future for LarpWorks? What can we expect to see in the future?
So we have the Blockbuster Chronicles coming up, but you won't see that again until next summer. It's kind of our current thing. And as it stands right now, we have September, October, November. The state parks are closed, or at least Fountain Blue is closed because they're doing maintenance and renovation everywhere. And then from December through May, we're gonna hit the end of the iteration. So it's gonna be
January.
Yeah, it's gonna be 8 games in 9 months.
Yep,
Wow.
8 games, the new characters.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
so excited.
Right, and so I think in November during that off weekend, we're going to be having another play test of the Omega Network.
Okay.
Which, for those who are unfamiliar, it's essentially a futuristic sci-fi western kind of feel LARP with Nerf weapons. And then next year we're gonna end this iteration, get ready to launch the new iterations. We've got not a LARP thing specifically, but we're getting close to releasing the in-play and out-of-play dynamic card game, Minotaur's Labyrinth. And mainly we're just trying to keep engaged with the gaming community in general, and not necessarily just our LARP thing, though that is our focus and my original real gaming love outside of really JRPGs for the PS1 and PS2.
Right,
Yeah.
So we're just staying on the grind, and we're keeping our heads up, and regardless of what else is going on, we're always preparing to LARP and preparing to bring the next big story and story experience to the various players. And I guess the next real thing is, after we get our current production loop out of the way, we're going to start branching out to different areas of the greater Gulf South, and then the country at large.
All right, and real quick, if the listeners were interested in getting in touch with you or finding out more about LarpWork Presents Mordavia, or just LarpWorks in general, where can they find you?
The quickest and easiest place to get in touch with the greater community, which is amazing. You can find us on Facebook under LarpWorks, but that's used more as like the official communique. And the community meet is at just Mordavia at Facebook. And then it's larpworks.com/forum or something thereabouts, but it'll bring you to our community forum website.
Okay.
And if someone wants to contact you personally, what's a good cell phone number for you? I'm just fucking
VoIP.
with you.
Or actually, in this case, for Earl. Find out in real life.
So if somebody wanted to just get to know you a little better.
What's a good mailing address for you there?
You'll have to talk to my managing agent, publicist, spokesperson.
How deeply do you sleep? Is that a...
Not at all. I am such a light sleeper. Sometimes I barely sleep because minute changes of sound in my immediate environment wake me right up.
Gotcha.
Well, guys, if y'all want to support the channel, don't forget you can always pay for stuff like our affection on Patreon, if that's still a thing. And then there's also the Facebook. It's a book of faces.
Yeah.
Our faces are on there. Instagram. We're instantly likable on Instagram.
We're on PayPal.
And we're on PayPal. If you want to pay for...
And Patreon.
And Patreon, if that's still a thing.
Yeah,
and then if you want to pay for Mikey's toupee, you can hit us up there.
Toupee for toupee?
Yeah, if to pay for the toupee, hit us up there. Also, we're still going to get... oh, God. Okay, technical difficulties sorted. Thank you, Chris.
These dwarves aren't nearly as good as this crafting stuff as they lead you to believe.
We're great at fantasy adventure setting stuff. This is not
a real world elf or some kind.
We're not built for Omega Network level technology, not at all. But yeah. Well, anyway, I'm Game Master Gillis.
Oh, wait.
No?
We have to say a special thank you to
Fuck, do we?
Matthew.
Oh yeah, Matthew, wherever you may be, you handsome motherfucker. Thank you so much.
Oh, we're thinking of you. All right, well, time to get out of here, and I'm Game Master Mikey.
And I'm still Game Master Gillis.
I'm Player Tyler.
And this is...
When are we playing? When are we playing?
When are we playing?
Friday.
I need to play that D&D game, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
3 years.